Hello, everyone. We would like to welcome you to another episode of Women's Wellness and Fertility with Dr. Dow. Dr. Dow is live with us right now. I am your host, Tiffany Kraft, and then we have as moderator on Facebook, our operations director, Leah Jonas. So if you have questions, just a couple of housekeeping things. You are welcome to write your questions into the comment section on Facebook. We also have a chat section and Q&A section on Zoom for you to have questions. And then we will answer them towards the end of the episode. So just beware that we're holding your questions until the end. With that, now I'd like to do a formal introduction so that we can get truly started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women's Wellness and Fertility with Dr. Dow and myself, Tiffany Kraft. We also have Leah Jonas on as moderator for our Facebook group. Tonight's topic is actually debunking fertility myths. So again, let me say that, it's debunking fertility myths. This is all about those floating suggestions for how to do the best in your fertility that may have truth to them and then again may not have truth to them. So we are with Dr. Dow to find out what is correct and what is not. With that, let's get started, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Dow once again for joining us in November.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, Tiffany.
Good. So I have a whole list. I've been doing some research and talking with women, and I've got a list of their top 10 questions. But before we get into those 10 myths, what I'd like to ask you, because this is our first talk that is fertility-based, and of course, this is going to set the foundation for what we will be doing as our deep dive in January about fertility. So one of the questions I have for you is, you are an acupuncturist that specializes in fertility. In fact, you're one of the top in the world. What made you go into this specialization?
Basically, I started my practice at the end of 1983, and I've been in practice for quite a while. And at that time, I was a general practitioner and treating numerous or many different conditions. And later on, as I was working with my father and basically kind of like the resident with him, and as he trains me, he realized that I have maybe some talents or some place that I need to learn on women's health. Mm-hmm. So he started to refer some of his patients who's having fertility challenges to me. And I was very fortunate, was able to really help some of these patients to achieve their goals of having a family. So they were able to get pregnant quickly, not necessarily easily, but quickly, mm-hmm. and at the same time have a wonderful, smooth pregnancy. So that got me very interested and excited about the area of women's health and reproductive medicine. Mm-hmm. So in 1987, I went back to China and studied under several masters who has given me an opportunity to learn more in depth about their experience on treating fertility challenged patients, as well as just in general women's health. So that really paved my role. I think I have to say is my father and my early patients who really had the trust in me and being able to allow me to have the opportunity to take care of them. And I'm really humbled by their convictions and their commitment to, drinking their herb tea and taking their treatment and being able to cut out their sugar and get rid of their favorite alcoholic drinks and really work with me to be able to help them to get pregnant. So that's how it really started. And I really, all these years, I really enjoy it. Every morning I wake up and I look forward to coming to work, to see my patients, to help them to achieve their dreams, because I know this is a very challenging area. It's very challenging, not just for the patients, very challenging for doctors as well. And I love challenges. And I think this is one of those things where, to me, to be able to help a couple to achieve their goal and having a child is one of the most sacred mission you can ever have. So I look forward to it, and I look forward for the challenge, but also the great opportunity that my patient bestow on me. So thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. And certainly we know many, many patients that you have supported through the process. And I'm sure a tremendous thanks goes out from them that you've helped them build these thriving families now. You know, I have a question. One of the things that I've observed over time is that a lot of women, including myself, have had challenges talking about infertility. Why do you think it is that we feel, I know I firsthand can say, I felt as if there was something fundamentally wrong with my body, not being able to get pregnant easily. And I think a lot of women that I've spoken with over the years would say the same thing. It's almost like this hush topic that we're afraid to speak about until more recently, maybe in the last 2 years, I'm seeing a lot about it.
I think there's several angles. I think the very first perspective is that being able to get pregnant and have a child is absolutely fundamental. Fundamentally is a woman's ability to be able to do that. I mean, you're born to be able to do that. So in some way, it's supposed to be innate. It's supposed to be part of you already. So when you don't, or you're not able, or having difficulties getting pregnant, it becomes a spiritual thing. It becomes a situation where you see this as a meaning and purpose of being a woman. You question whether or not you are a woman. You question whether or not you can really be a mother. You question whether or not you're cursed. You question whether or not, you did something wrong in your last lifetime. You start to look at all different angles. The reality is that getting pregnant, if you really look at the animal kingdom, human beings' ability to conceive, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of variables, and there's a lot of reasons, there's a lot of things that can inhibit and impede pregnancy. So as much as we think it's something that, a man, when you're young, when a man look at you the wrong way, you should be able to get pregnant, right?
Right. That myth is not on my list.
Yeah, that methodology doesn't really work. But, it's what I'm saying is that it is one of the biggest variable to this day. It is still age. Age plays a fundamental situation. If you look at it, fertility is the highest in the late teen to basically 25 years old, 26 years old. By the time when you reach 30 years old, your fertility rate has changed already. You're not 100%. And a lot of times on the average, when you're at 30 years old, I mean, your fertility rate is probably somewhere around 60%, 70%. By the time you're 35, it's definitely getting close to 50% or even less. And when you get to 40, we won't even talk about that. But as you progress, so different stages of life, that variable goes down. So even though you might feel young, say when you're 30 years old, 32 or 33, even though you might feel you're quite young, but definitely a certain amount of number of women are going to already have challenges. So I don't want to put this in the sense of that this is something that everyone can do. The reality is that there is definitely a lot of issues in this area that we have to overcome. So even though you may have the potential to get pregnant, but nevertheless, there's still issues that we see in one's health that can create that problem.
Oh, sorry, I went dark on you. I don't know how to go lighter.
I'm good.
We're going to be like this because I don't know what he did to make it go lighter for me. Oh, there we go. Okay. So in view of that, again, we're going to be doing a deeper dive into how preparing your body for fertility takes place in January. But at least for tonight, can we just talk about how does acupuncture and herbs affect fertility?
Well, first of all, for the longest time, for thousands of years, I would say for the last 4,000 years, Chinese medicine has been the sole medicine system accumulated through, the knowledge is accumulated through time as the sole medicine that's used to treat reproductive medicine in the Greater China area. And it has been successful in many different reasons. One, these are herbs. Herbal medicine is extremely potent and very helpful in dealing with different fertility challenges, whether it's infection, whether it is irregularity in ovulation, whether it is a situation of dysmenorrhea, endometriosis, or polycystic ovarian disorders. A lot of the herbal formulation that's passed down has been quite effective and quite helpful in all of these conditions. Now, combining with other modalities of Chinese medicine, such as acupuncture, such as cupping, such as tuina, such as qigong, such as moxibustion, all of these tools can be extremely helpful in preparing our body and helping our body to overcome obstacles for us to conceive. So it's been very effective for many years. Obviously, even with that, there's still things that Chinese medicine cannot always absolutely be the only thing that's helpful, because there are situations such as tubal blockages. If your tubes are blocked, they're scarred, then the eggs is not going to come down the pipe. So, and the sperm is not going to meet the egg. So a lot of times in these cases, you have no choice, but you have to do an IVF situation to bypass the tube. So in this situation, acupuncture and Chinese medicine is not going to be able to help you with that. There are some cases that has shown acupuncture and Chinese medicine, when combined, can treat tubal blockages. But, you know, that success rate is not very high. You know, you're talking about success rate about 30%, the most is 40%. But even if you're able to open up the tube, a lot of times you're still running into obstacles of pregnancy. There is still pregnancy issue, and the reasons because as the egg travels down the tube, this tube may not be so healthy, and that egg may pick up some antibodies along the way, and that can create problems for the sperm to fertilize. Vice versa is true. A sperm swims up the tube, it does the same thing. So when you are in a diseased environment, even though you open up the tube, it may not necessarily fertilize well, or that when it does fertilize, it may have damaged the embryo. So in those situations, then IVF is necessary. And so these are some, and some other things also when you combine with IVF or assisted reproductive medicine along with Chinese medicine, sometimes you work the best.
So do you feel it's best to work hand in hand, or as an acupuncturist, are you able to identify what these issues might be as they're occurring? How does a person make the most wise choice for what they're going to do?
I think it needs to be really individualized. I think every patient have their needs. There's some patients who are younger. There's some patient who is older. There's some patient who has conditions that you cannot wait, and you have to get going. And so you have to be really knowledgeable in both Chinese medicine as well as Western medicine to be able to make that determination quickly. And at the same time, you got to have a cadre of Western medicine counterpart who can work with you, especially in dealing with some of these patients that may require their assessment right away, or may require help along the way in their pursuit, in their goals. So being able to work with different Western medicine people like IVF surgeon or even mental health professionals are crucial. It's very helpful for our patients. So that's why I work a lot with a lot of different people in this field, because we have one goal and one goal only, is to do the best for our patients, to not waste time, be efficient, and be effective for them to achieve their goal.
That's a beautiful goal to have and support us all in, so thank you. So let us transition a bit here and talk about myths. Why do you think that there are so many myths surrounding the topic of fertility?
Well, as long as you have human, we are going to have myth. You heard of this thing called fake news?
Probably.
I think fake news have its own use, but for scientists, fake news is not very good, and a lot of times fake news creates problems. But I think myth is very similar. There's a lot of myth. Not as I grow up, I mean, all of us grow up with myth.
Yes, I do.
And I think as we become a mature adult, our goal in our life is to really distill this myth to its fundamental core. Not only to break through that myth, but also trying to understand where the myth coming from and what the purpose of this myth are. Because when you understand this myth, you understand the psychology why this myth stays. There are purpose for this myth. It's not all bad, but a lot of times they are not factual, and that can be sometimes can be damaging also as well.
Okay. Well, with that, let's jump into our first myth. So these are in no particular order, but I did want to cover some of those that seem to be the most popular out there in the media. So the first one, couples who want to have a baby should always try for a year before seeking fertility help. True or false?
Not necessarily. Boy, if you are in the 40 years old and you're trying to get pregnant, you're going to wait for 1 year. That's a lot of time wasted. I think it's age dependent, and I think it's also condition dependent. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're over the age of 35, let's take an age 35 to say 38, and if you try for about 2 to 3 months and it's not working, I think you should seek a professional right away. When you're 40 years old, you should basically seek a professional right away. I don't think you should wait. And that can actually really help you to improve your chances quickly. So age is the number one variable. Then you take a look at other conditions. Now, if you have a situation where you're having very irregular ovulation, irregular cycle, irregular menstruation, then you may want to find somebody to take care and help you with that right away because you're not ovulating properly. If you have tubal blockages, then you definitely want to find ways to overcome that. If you have other issues such as fibroids, you should definitely assess that to see if the fibroid is interfering with implantation. So there are many different reasons that you need to seek professionals for that. At least what I always suggest is to make sure that you have a good OBGYN that has been that's been doing some screening and taking care of you for years, and at least start that communication and start that talk, that conversation with your OBGYN first, and so that the OBGYN can be cognizant of what you're trying to do, and they can start to do some testing for you.
Okay. So then our next question, our next question is, women who monitor their body temperature to boost their conception chances should wait until their temperature goes up before having intercourse.
Well, okay, so I guess you want to be warm before you have sex, right?
Right.
It's kind of like incubator. Let's make sure you're warm before you have sex. I don't know if that really works that well. I mean, the reality is that we often, and when I tell my patients is that don't wait until your temperature goes up, because when your temperature rises, it usually, the temperature, the BBT, the basal body temperature, is a relationship between the temperature and progesterone. So what that means is that when the progesterone level rises, the temperature rises. Well, when the progesterone rises, it means you already ovulated. Okay, so if you look at the temperature graph from the lowest point to the high point as it rises, somewhere between that point to the rising point is probably ovulation, sometime in between. We don't usually able to tell the exact timing. Some women have twinges, some women have cramp, so they can feel it more succinctly, but majority of us don't know. Majority of, and it changes from cycle to cycle. It's not every cycle you're going to have such an opportunity to feel. So I often say that actually go by your mucus if you have it. So if you have vaginal discharge, if your mucus start to change its consistency, that is the time to begin intercourse. Okay.
So right
So,
when you see that discharge is when you would want to start. Okay.
right. And that discharge could actually be about 2 to 3 days before the actual ovulation.
Oh,
And the
interesting.
reality is you want to get the sperm up to the tube already by a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time when the egg already drop into the tube and you just start having sex, that's a little bit late.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you want to get to it actually a little bit beforehand. So instead of using all these temperature chart, which is helpful, don't get me wrong, you can use that, but don't forget, basal temperature chart, it's a retrospective look on when you ovulate. That means looking backward is very helpful, but it's not a predictor of future events. So it doesn't like predict when you're gonna ovulate, or you cannot be so succinct that, oh my God, I'm ovulating today. It's much harder to do that. So therefore, what you want to do is basically go by other signs, and the symptoms of vaginal discharge is a one good one to start.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a couple of follow-up questions on that, and then we'll go into the next myth. So based on what you were just saying, you are recommending then that a woman be looking for her vaginal discharge, and that would be when she sees that happen, definitely have sex on that day or evening, correct? And then should a woman do that I've heard things of every other day, or some people say you should just go for it and do it every day. What are your thoughts on that?
I like to say that sex is a love-making process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a physical kind of duty that one must do. I mean, what a way to turn off one's sex drive.
Right?
And,
And
and
psychologically, it's so much pressure for both the man
no
and the
kidding,
woman.
no kidding.
A
It's
lot of
really,
pressure.
yeah, it's a lot of pressure, and sometimes there's no way around it. It's just hard. So a lot of time I tell my patient, trying to make some fun out of it, trying to have some fun with it. Don't just like, oh, I got to do it today. Oh my God, I got to do it again. I got to do it today again. It's like, it doesn't really, and first of all, when you're not psychological, when you're mentally, when you're physically not aligned, your
Mm-hmm.
juice is not flowing. Your
Yes.
body is tense. So your receptivity of these sperm is going to be weaker. It's not going to be as good. Okay. So we don't want our patient to just make into like a duty kind of thing. I think it need to be fun if it's possible. And so because there's already pressure of like schedule. And
Mm-hmm.
so we need to try to make the fun as much as we can. So I usually recommend it's basically how you feel. If you feel like you want to do it every day, go for it. If you have the energy to do it every day, go for it. Don't be shy. Go for it. And if both sides feel like this is something they enjoy each other's intimacy and be able to do that, I would say good, excellent. The only time that I say it may not be so good is when a man has semen problems, or when a man has a weak semen analysis, or when they don't recover. When they recover, as we know that men's sperm does go down as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have frequent ejaculations, you're going to lose sperm each time. But your body does know how to produce and create more sperm. It's just that it may not be as robust as the first time around. So it all really depends. So when we have a man with suboptimal semen analysis, that's when we become more precious with their sperm and with their ejaculation. And that's when I might tell them, hey, let's do it twice a week, or let's do it, every other day. Let's try not to push this too hard. So a lot of time I would do that.
Okay. That is
I'm
interesting.
sorry. And I would also like add on, maybe we should do insemination in some of these situations also as well. Thank you.
True. Okay. So that actually brings us to our next myth. The next myth is if a man has had a child in the past, he can't be the reason that a couple is infertile. True or false?
Oh my God, a man's sperm can change. Yeah, it's, that's the reason why a lot of times if we are seeing a patient and we ask a man to actually repeat their semen analysis almost annually, especially when a woman hasn't gotten pregnant yet, because it does change. Sickness or disease can create problems. So I recommend that if we're in the process of getting pregnant, we need to make sure we check that annually. So to answer your question, if that answers your question, is false that the sperm stays the same. Okay, as we get older, the sperm can get better or worse. I like to think better, but a lot of time it's actually worse. And also worldwide, we don't really know the reasoning. We believe that there is some environmental factors at play, that overall, worldwide, the semen quantities and quality has been declining worldwide. And there's a lot of speculation that probably environmental pollutions may have something to do with it. So we don't know yet that, we don't know the cause, but stay tuned. A lot of scientists are trying to do some research, trying to figure out why the reason for that.
Okay. So let's move on to our next myth then. Thank you for that, which kind of is segues from what you just talked about. The next myth is, it's very popular, is foods and sex positions will help.
Well, yeah, if you do one of those, what's those yoga thing where you strap yourself onto the ceiling? What is that called?
Aerial yoga?
Area yoga. Yeah, maybe you can have sex with both sides with area yoga. I think that might work really well. Except you might be so exhausted. No, there is really. I don't think I've ever read any literature out there to say, hey, missionary is better than if you're on top and etc. I think it's comfort. And I think it's also what provides you to the most pleasure also well. Humans are pleasure-seeking animals. And that when you have the best pleasure, a lot of times, your blood flows better.
Right.
Your hormones work better. And all that's going to help you to receive the sperm better. So I think I would go with pleasure as your knowledgeable base is what your body tells you. Now, there are some patients who says that it just hurts when they do rear injury. Well, don't do it, because that really, it's gonna defeat its purpose. And there's some woman who sits on top, and what happens that sperm flows out. But don't be alarmed, because some of that sperm is gonna flow out. And
that actually is a big one for a lot of women. They get afraid of, oh my God, it goes up and then it comes right back down.
Yes. I tell them not to worry too much about it, because there's absolutely a certain amount of sperm going to make it up there. Yeah. And also that change your position. I mean, don't stay with one position all the time. Explore. Sex is about love making. It's about loving somebody. It's about being intimate with somebody. It's about embracing one's spirit and soul. And it's a beautiful thing. So make it fun, make it pleasurable for both parties. I think it's probably the most important criteria.
Okay. And what about in relation to foods? Is it true that there are foods that will help to stimulate the process?
Well, I wouldn't try to drip maple syrup over someone's body when you're trying to make love. Is that what you're thinking about? But if that's not what you're thinking about, there are certain foods that is very good nutrition for one's sperm and one's egg. We do know if a man has sufficient zinc in their diet, it's kind of helpful. What's zinc? Well, things like oyster. Can be very helpful. I don't recommend somebody just go eat oyster the whole day long, but occasionally with some extra oyster and some clams, I think that's always really helpful. There's some people who doesn't eat shellfish. So then therefore you may want to just pick up some supplementation, and that could be very helpful. And in women, I mean, there are a lot of things that can be very helpful for egg quality. I think ample amount of protein is important. And also don't be anemic. I mean, a lot of women are anemic, and when they're anemic, their blood is not rich enough, and that doesn't help with hormones, nor does that help with egg quality. So the very first thing that we address is to make sure that there's no iron deficiency anemia. So a lot of times if there's an iron deficiency anemia, we want to try to get some iron supplement. And also folate is also very important. Folate has to do not just with the woman, but also with, shall we say, embryo and fetal development. Proper embryo and fetal development requires a good amount of folate. So those are kind of things that's important. I personally tell my patients in this day and age, have some prenatal vitamin. Take some prenatal vitamin, even though the evidence of it really helpful to your egg quality is still questionable. It's not completely solid ironclad kind of thing. But we do know that through food, you can get a lot of nutrient, but a lot of people don't necessarily eat a good diet. So a lot of times I just automatically tell people to take a prenatal vitamin supplement just to get started. And there are other supplements that a lot of doctor uses, such as CoQ10, such as fish oil. Personally, I've also used royal jelly, which seems to be helpful. So there are definitely some supplement that you can use. So food, it's actually important, and you got to eat. One of the things that I come across is some people just don't eat breakfast, and I tell them you gotta eat breakfast because a wonderful stability in your blood sugar actually is very helpful to your egg production, follicle production, as well as your egg quality.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to our next myth. This is an unusual one. I don't know the answer to this actually. If you have your period, you can't get pregnant. True or false?
If you have your period, you can't get pregnant. You mean when you have sex during your period, you can get pregnant?
So if you had sex during your period, is it possible to get pregnant or is it not?
Well, you want to talk to some of the teens who get pregnant having sex during their period?
I don't even have an answer for that one.
They do. There are times it all really depends, because if you have early ovulation, most of women, if we run a 29, 28, 30-day cycles, a lot of time we can ovulate around day 14. But there's some women who have shorter cycles. They might ovulate on day 7, day 8, or day 6. And with a good youth and strong energy and essence and vitality, you might get a woman pregnant even when they are during their period time. So that's not necessarily a myth. Is it easy? No. I think having your period and having sex during that time is messy, and the sperm probably gets washed out. The likelihood of being able to get a woman pregnant is not that high. It's probably quite low, but it's not impossible.
Okay. Our next myth, we addressed this before, but I'm still going to, I don't want to gloss over it in case there's anything that you want to add. And that would be couples should have intercourse every day to increase the chances of pregnancy.
I think we went through that, and I think, again, it's important to be that it's pleasurable. It's not just a function of schedule, but it's a function of lovemaking. So having it every day may not necessarily be all that good, because if you save up a sperm and having every other day might actually work better, or even every 3 days might work better. So it depends on each couple, and depends on the health status of each couple also as well.
Okay. This is another one that you've already touched on a bit, but if you'd like to add on to it, this myth is you can't have a baby after the age of 35.
Wow, I think that's a total myth. First of all, you absolutely can. One of my patients who is 46 3/4, she was able to get pregnant naturally even at 46 and 3/4. And there are definitely reports that has discussed and shown there's some people who are able to get pregnant in the late 40s. Now, these are outliers, okay? It's not that easy. The percentage and odds of being able to be pregnant with your own egg in the late 40s are very, very small. Very, very small, okay? But over the age of 35, there are plenty of women who still gets pregnant pretty easily. And these women go on to have very healthy pregnancy and very healthy baby. So it's over the age of 35, it's definitely not an issue. And if you do have an issue, there are definitely treatments that we can do in both Chinese medicine as well as assisted reproductive medicine, such as IUIs, intrauterine insemination, as well as IVF. All those can be very helpful to a woman seeking fertility help over the age of 35. Now, when you get to 40s, it gets dicier. When you get to 40s, the odds start to get much, much lower. It's much more difficult. So a lot of doctors recommend when you're 42 or above to really seek out donor egg situation or adoption. Try something different because at that time, the chances of being able to get pregnant is quite low.
Okay. And this was actually one of our other ones about, does IVF help women in their late 40s and early 50s to get pregnant?
Well, just like even natural, I think the IVF process and IVF success rate declines dramatically in the 40s, no different than natural also as well. So I would say that it's hard. It's hard when you, as I say earlier, age is the biggest variable. So if you get into the 40s, especially 45 or above, that's going to be very, very challenging and very difficult. So even for IVF.
Okay. Let's move on to our next question. Taking the pill, not question, sorry, but myth. Taking the pill can put a chill on a woman's ability to conceive. True or false?
I think that's false. I think the birth control pill is interesting situation. There's no study that's shown that birth control pill really decline or decreases your fertility, okay? I do know that sometimes using a birth control pill can actually help you with a certain condition such as cramps, dysmenorrhea, endometriosis. But sometimes it also kicks the can down the road. So what I mean is instead of dealing with, say, irregular cycles or painful periods, the causes of it, instead, because you're taking a birth control pill, it basically neutralizes it, make it feel a lot better. Then you don't deal with it. You think you're okay. So by the time when you get to 35 years old, for example, and you come off the birth control pill, all of a sudden, you're where you were before. Pain start to come back, your period become irregular, and so you never really treated that problem in the very first place. So a lot of time I usually recommend a lot of the mothers, when their child, when their adolescent, teenage girl are having irregular periods or cramps, especially severe ones, to make sure to take care of it, get them treated. Don't just take the birth control pill, even though that might be one of the therapy options. It's probably important to reduce that inflammatory activity, especially if it's got endometriosis. Okay.
And then our final myth of the evening, and then we're going to move on to questions actually, because they're already rolling in from individuals. But our final myth, fertility issues are only the woman's responsibility.
I wish that's the case. Nope. We men get off so easily, don't we? We just do. It's terrible. No. Sperm issues, it's a big problem. And I would say that man is 50% of the equation. And it's not only that, and sometimes even when the sperm looks good, the quality may not be so good. So if the count is good, the mortality is good, and the morphology sometimes may not be so good. And sometimes you may have what we call a DNA fragmentation. So where that the chromosome of the sperm, fragmented or having, damages, and that can be a problem. And you can have an issue with fertilization, and that further can create miscarriages or embryo dysfunctions or problems. So I would say that we need to be very cognizant about taking care of men also as well. We need to take a look at. So a lot of times, minimally, you have to examine the man counterpart and then do semen analysis at least 2 times because it's a lot of variables. So we do it first month, and then the second month we do it again, and we compare and making sure that the semen analysis is actually good. If not, then we definitely move on to treat the man also as well.
Okay, well, thank you for that. You wish it didn't mean just women, but for us women, it means taking some pressure off of us.
Actually, you know what? It's a real funny situation. I got some guys whose sperm, when they go in, and the sperm just like off the roof, just like 300 million. It's just like flying colors. And I tell you, the boost of ego is, I don't even know what to tell you. It's huge. And that sometimes for the woman is quite annoying.
Yes, I'm sure.
And then, of course, and there's some men where their sperm's like 20 million, and it's like, okay, it's right by the border.
Mm-hmm.
They hated it. They just think like something's wrong with me, and it's like, I'm not virile enough. I'm just not man enough.
Oh.
So you think that men don't have emotional things around this? You're wrong. Check it again. They do. They don't like it. They don't like it. And so we do deal with them. We do help them. Men doesn't really like to see doctors as much as women. So a lot of times you have to kind of draw them in. Mm-hmm. Of course, usually it's their woman that drag them into the clinic.
No doubt. Okay, well, as I said, we've got some questions rolling in. So I'm going to start right now to give you the first one. This is from a viewer that says, many of the images and stories we hear and see in mainstream media give the impression that birth in most cases, give the impression in most cases that birth is painful. I find this instills a lot of fear in many women. What are some birth teachings and stories we can take as better and more joyful examples?
Well, as a man trying to talk about birthing, it's a little bit difficult when I don't have the personal experience of having a baby going through my vagina. So first of all, I have to say that I acknowledge that is a process. It can be a difficult, can be a challenging, and can be a very uncomfortable and painful process. But I think there are many tools. I think there are many ways that you can make the birthing smoother. Taking classes is very helpful, and trying to learn some knowledge of how to really manage labor. I think that's also very, very important. This field, gestational care, is changing. Obstetric care is changing all the time. So what we understand, the traditional care may not be the same as now. I mean, just recently, for example, just this week, we have research that came out that in the old days, when you have a full dilation of your cervix, or commonly we call it stage 2 labor, a lot of time you don't necessarily want to push right away. You want to delay and delay as long as possible. And that myth is debunked really in this one study where it shows that as long as you're fully dilated, you should start pushing and don't wait. The key has been that if you start pushing, you lose that energy, and if it's not successful right away, then you run the risk of going to an emergency C-section. So a lot of times that's always the fear of a mother to be. So in this situation, a lot of times, we need more further study, but it's wonderful to show that once you're fully dilated, you can just go for it, really start pushing. But I think it's important to understand that birthing, it's like a marathon process. It's very important to preserve your energy. It's very important to have strong energy going in. And a lot of time at the later part of your pregnancy, the third trimester, you're carrying this big baby. It's like a big backpack. You're tired all the time. Your neck is tense. Your lower back is tense. So you start to lose energy on how to push. So a lot of times, what I often want to do, this is the most important time in the third trimester, it's to really make the woman more comfortable and encourage her to do exercise if she can continue, such as prenatal yoga, such as some swimming, aquatic exercises, even some gentle squats can be really, really helpful, especially when you go beyond 35 weeks. A lot of things you can really start doing more, even though you're quite large. You need to find ways to keep yourself strong.
Okay. Thank you. I hope that helps respond to the question for this individual. For all of you that are sending in questions, please feel free to write it again in the comments section of our Zoom or on Facebook, and we'll try to address these as we are moving along. I have another question from an individual. Let's do this one. Do I need to take prenatal vitamins if I am also taking herbs?
You should, because the herbs are meant to be for treatment, for certain therapeutic values. So it may not necessary, and not all herbs is going to contain all the vitamin that's necessary. So I usually recommend still take the prenatal vitamin if you can. That would be a wonderful thing to do.
Okay. Our next question is, what can you tell me about glutathione and collagen for fertility and egg health? Sorry if I didn't pronounce
Are you saying lutein?
Glutathione. And
let me write it. Hold on a second. Let me write it down. I cannot visualize it too well. I can visualize if I write it down. How do you spell it again?
Glutathione.
Oh, glutathione.
Glutathione, sorry about that.
Okay.
And
what else? And then there's one more?
Collagen.
Collagen. Okay, so what's the question?
What can you tell me about glutathione and collagen for fertility and egg health?
Well, these are kind of essential elements of nutrition that we need for our body. So glutathione as well as collagen is what our tissue needs, and it also creates matrix for our organs as well as in our endocrine system. But you can find both of them equally as much as in our food. So I frequently ask our patients to eat different food. For example, fish can be very helpful. Make sure we have some whole grains, especially, whole grains. If you don't have gluten allergy or gluten issues, you can definitely go for whole grains, whole wheat. Other grains such as quinoa, such as beans. You can also go for different beans, soybeans, lentil, garbanzo beans, white beans, navy beans. There are many different kind of beans that actually can be very nutritious with protein, pretty high protein content and oil content. That's actually really helpful. So glutathione as well as collagen, they occur naturally in many different food sources, and they are essential for our body's function, and they can be really helpful for our egg quality. I also frequently ask my patient, especially if their egg quality is poor, to really go for some bone marrow soup, especially beef bone marrow. Hopefully it's free range bone marrow. Bone marrow soup tends to be got a lot of gelatin, got a lot of collagen, and other different nutrients that can be very helpful.
Do you, when it comes to bone marrow soup, do you feel that it should be homemade, or could they purchase it at, let's say, a Whole Foods or one or their local health food store?
Well, it depends on if you're a cook or not, if you have time. I mean, if you're somebody who loves to cook and enjoys cooking, you can buy a bunch of beef bone from your butcher and then take it home, put it in a stock pot and use some water and cook it. And you can put some spices in there and make it tasty and use that as a soup stock for different soups that you might drink. And or if you're too busy, a lot of my patients are working professionals, so a lot of times they may not have such time to cook, so they would just actually buy the actual broth and bone marrow soup itself, and they would use that to make soup with it.
Okay. You know, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, but I've heard this mentioned before of having the bone broth soup, not only for those in fertility proceedings, but also just in general for good health. But how much do we need to drink and how often for it to actually be beneficial to us?
Well, I think it really depends on each individual patients. So there's some patient where I find that it's more necessary. I can go as much as every other day, 8 ounces of bone marrow soup. But I don't tell them to just drink the bone marrow. I try to say, hey, mix with some vegetables, we mix with some other things to make it tasty, because sometimes the bone marrow soup doesn't taste much. So I ask them to try to make it so it's tasty, so it's part of their diet.
Okay. Our next question is, are there over-the-counter medications I should steer clear of when I'm trying to get pregnant, I assume?
Well, we try to avoid all of the over-the-counter medication if we can, especially painkillers. There are people who take ibuprofen regularly, and that's not always necessarily good for your body, and it's not good for the health of a baby once you're pregnant. So a lot of time, as much as we can, we try to avoid all medication as possible. As a general rule of thumb, that's what you're trying to do. Now, there are categories, okay? There are categories of drugs that can be okay, and that we don't know, and that downright is just not good. So there are different categories, A, B, C. So a lot of times you can actually look online. There are a lot of informations on the drug that you're taking, and they will actually tell you what category it is in. But majority of time, our general rule of thumb is try not to do as much as possible medications. Now, there are patients that I treat that actually have to be on medication. There are people who has, for example, diabetes, and they are trying to get pregnant, which is challenging. So they are on certain medications for that. There are people who, for example, has depressions, and some of the depression symptoms are so severe, coming off these medication would be detrimental to them. So in those situations, we definitely don't want to do that, and we can continue and let them continue with some of these medications. So I think I want to say, in general rule of thumb, is trying to avoid all medication as possible, but individually depends on their case and their situation. We can always make allowances, especially these are category A, known situation where the drug is not an issue.
Okay, thank you. We are approaching the last question that I have received is a submission. So anybody that is in the audience right now, if you still have questions, please write those in to us. I'm going to take a pause before I ask this last question. And I know right behind you is a book that you've written about fertility, the Dial of Fertility. Yes. What inspired you to write that book?
I would like to say the book is really written by my patients. Dana Herkos was one of my patients who was such an inspiration to me. And she really just told me, Dao, you got to write this book. You just have to write this book. This book is so important for other people. And so she and I just say, okay, Dana, let's do it. But I'm not a writer. You are the writer. I am a terrible writer. But that's not my forte. And if you're willing to do it, let's do it together. And she just wonderful. She took on the task, and really is in some ways her work really. And also I want to say the book is the work of all my patients. There's a lot of my patients who shared their stories in the book. There's so many little stories, and there's so many different experiences that I gather from them, and I put in the book to share with others. So I like to say that this is a team effort. And this is a team effort of everyone who gave me the opportunity to take care of them. And they share really freely all their expertise, their understandings, and their traumas, challenges, going through their fertility, trial and learning, and all that goes into that book.
Yes. I have to say, I bought that book maybe a little over a year before I ever met you. And it truly is one of the best books for any woman that is preparing for fertility. It really is one of the best books I've ever read about this topic. And it's something I continually recommend to others. So well done.
Thank you for your kind compliment. Thank you so much.
Very deserved. Okay, so on our last question, it seems we've answered everybody's questions in the audience now, but our last question is, what else do you have to offer that will increase my chances of fertility?
That has to do, that's individualized. What I mean by that is that all depends on your condition, your situation.
Right.
For example, there are some people who may have endometriosis. Take that example, that's an autoimmune disorder. And with an autoimmune disorder, there's going to be some specific diet that you have to do. For example, a lot of endometriosis patients may not be so suitable with gluten, for example. So we may have to take a look at that. There are situations where that certain foods might be very helpful for pain relieving, such as turmeric or such as cardamom or cinnamon. So we need to take a look at some of those herbs. But other people who might have tubal blockages or different situations such as fibroids may not have the same kind of advice that I give to them because they may not work as well. So I think as the advice goes, I think it's individualized to begin with. But there are some general things that you can do. First of all, I think there are things that you can control. Take a look at what you can control and what you can contribute. I think the very first thing is your lifestyle. Okay, take a look at your lifestyle. Are you overly stressed? Are you overly stressed from your work, from your relationship? And can you find ways to diminish those stress? You may not be able to get rid of those stress, but sometimes you can put the stress in a box. Okay, you can manage it, put a box around it, put a fence around it. And so I think those are kind of things I would immediately do. Take a look at ways to deal with stress. That's number one. Number two is sleep. Okay, are you getting enough sleep? As an adult, you want to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and some people need more than 7 to 8 hours sleep. And it has to be a sound sleep. It has to be something that you're not waking up all the time type of sleep. It's a deep sleep. Because that deep sleep helps you to restore, help you to repair. And if there are quality issue of your egg or follicles, your body can actually do a lot of repairing in those situations. So I would say sleep is probably the second most important that you can really work on. The third thing is frequently I say sugar. And so it's like 3 S's. The third one is sugar. But basically it means your diet. Okay, looking at your nutrition. Are you consuming too much sugar? If you are, you need to cut that out. You need to cut that back. Are you drinking too much alcohol? Are you smoking? You know, these are kind of things that immediately can increase your fertility when you quit them. Okay, and then you can pick on little things like, are you drinking too much coffee? Okay, because sometimes when you drink too much coffee, you're not sleeping that well. And then caffeine itself, controversial. Sometimes it's helpful for sperm, sometimes it's not so helpful for the egg. So a lot of times you have to kind of take a look at some of these things. And the other thing is, I see cool things. in the Chinese medicine sense, we usually don't like people to drink too much icy cold stuff or eating too much ice cube. And the reason being is that, you're going down to your pelvic cavity, going to your tummy, and you're going to take some microcirculation away from your pelvic cavity to kind of warm up your stomach, warm up your abdomen area. It may not be wise to do that. So a lot of time we try to ask people to be more careful with the diet. And I think it's not just in the sense of these things that you should avoid. I think fundamentally some of the most important thing with the diet, with nutrition, is time also. Are you eating on time? Are you eating 3 meals a day? Are you skipping meals? I think that's even more crucial than what you eat. So right off the bat, it's important that if you eat every day at a certain time, plus minus 10, 15 minutes, you should stay around that stability with that schedule, that eating schedule. With that in mind, your blood sugar will be more stable. If your blood sugar is stable, your insulin is stable. Your insulin is stable, your female hormone is much, much better. So a lot of time you want to see that happening. So, and the other thing is don't skip meals. A lot of people skip breakfast. So I try to get them to eat breakfast if they can. Otherwise, that's about it. So I often say the 3 S's: the stress, the sleep, and the sugar, which means your diet.
Okay. Thank you. That was just such a beneficial chat that we had tonight. I hope that our viewers really enjoy this. So we're going to be back on the topic of fertility in January. And if you had to say 3 things we can look forward to in that chat, which is all about preparing our uterus for pregnancy.
And what are we doing for December?
Pardon me?
What are we doing for December? Aren't we doing something for December?
December is back to women, all women. December, we're going to be talking about the holidays and weight and how to manage our emotions and our weight and successfully our stress levels more than anything getting through the holidays.
I can't wait.
You're getting a lot of thank yous, by the way. Thank yous are coming in. So very appreciative viewers you have right now.
It's my honor. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I as well would like to thank everybody. If you would like to watch this episode again, it will be available for immediate replay on our Facebook, our Dial of Wellness Facebook channel, and it's in the video section. If you look on your left side menu, you'll see there's a videos archive area. This will also be available in YouTube in probably the beginning to mid next week if you want to access through that. Also, I wanted to remind you that our next chat through the wellness series that we do will be with Dr. Mao on Monday, and he is going to be chatting about the health benefits of gratitude. So he has some very important things to share with us about gratitude, and that will take place at 5 p.m. on the Infinity Facebook channel. So before we go, Dr. Dao, is there any last thoughts that you have to share with us?
No, I just want to wish everybody who is attending or who are really trying to accomplish their goals of building a family, I want to pray and wish you well. And I hope that you're successful in your endeavors and in your journey of fertility.
Thank you, Dr. Dao. Thank you for your beautiful words, and thank you. We all know that you're just so heartfelt in your desire to support others through their journeys. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. Enjoy a wonderful evening. Again, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you on Monday with our next chat. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Dr. Dao. Thank you.
See you later, Tiffany.
Bye.